And we're back. Famous last words, been saying that since after Milton and Helene last year. And to tell you the truth, to kind of tease ahead to the second half of the show, kind of looking a little familiar out there, looking very, very somewhat backloaded for the second half of the hurricane season. If you tuned in with us yesterday, I'd mentioned we're in the halftime show right now, so things are quiet. It's time to go back to your regularly scheduled programming before the Atlantic kicks off. But first, closer to home, maybe a bit of a stormy Labor Day weekend for us, not only here in Florida, but for the rest of the Southeast United States and up the East Coast. So good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to News 6 Weather at 9:30. I'm meteorologist David Nazario in for Jonathan Kegges. He'll be rejoining us next week. I know a few of you over in the chat have asked when he'd be back. Looks like Monday at the very latest he should be back and ready to take back the helm after I'm finished up this week, and then we'll have the fabulous meteorologist Michelle Morgan in on Friday night as well. So hang tight, everybody. We're still, regardless of who's in the hot seat, going to get you the information that you need to make the right decisions, especially as you approach the first holiday weekend of the month, or I should say of September. Kind of a bit of a weird segue there. But anyways, we'll take a moment to say hello. I see Kevin Hawthorne tuning in from Lakeland over on YouTube. We have Jody as well, tuned in on my personal YouTube channel. I thank you for that. It's a genuine appreciation there. We also have Melissa Riley. Thanks so much for tuning in. Elizabeth, Kiera, good to see you as well. And then Olga Z, good evening to everybody. And thanks to those of you tuning in over on our News 6 Plus app as well. Let's get you some headlines before I take up too much of your time just talking about all sorts of random things. So first and foremost, you'll see the headline of the day. The front overhead is dissolving. We've had, I don't know why I suddenly skipped over to the radar. Hold on, Butterfingers tonight. There we go. Let's get the headlines back up in front of you. So the current front is dissolving, and because of that, we're going to reintroduce another batch of possible heavier rainfall as the next system comes down, and I'll walk you through the steering on that. And then good news for our not-so-tropical aficionados out there, we're going to be quiet for the next 7, possibly 10 days, if not out for the next 2 weeks into September, despite the peak of the hurricane season coming right at us as we speak. Now, spoiler alert, even though I already ripped the Band-Aid off, let's take you outside and look at the radar. So it looks like we just had looks like a special weather statement up there through Marion County. We've got a bit of an interaction going on between the sea breeze coming in off the east coast and the westerly flow that's still driving a lot of moisture over central Florida. Because the front is dying off, we just don't quite have much of that trigger mechanism to get things to start firing up. So we had to rely on the sea breeze today. And you can see, even though the showers and storms are not nearly as scattered about central Florida as they have been the last few days, we still have some doozy of cells out there wandering around, especially if you're up near Ocala and the villages. And we can't forget Polk County. It looks like we had some stuff flare up about an hour or so ago, and those are washing out as well as we speak. Now, we're going to move you on to the water vapor. Not much has changed here. You look at the pattern across the United States, and we still have that enormous trough extending down from eastern Canada all the way down to the Sunshine State. We finally got a little bit of that nickname back today. Saw some really good shots out there from Daytona Beach, other areas of central and east Florida, without as much of the cloud cover and the gloominess we had to deal with during the first couple days of this week. Still a lot of moisture out there. If I take you full screen, you can see those blobs of green off the west coast, and because of those westerly winds pushing everything towards the east, we are going to keep rain chances in the mix, and we're slowly but surely going to start headed in the upward direction as well. I got to bust out my favorite telestrator, the little doodle bob here, and make sure my screen is up so we can do some drawing. And if you notice, we have a large plume of moisture out over the Great Plains coming off the front range of the Rockies. That's the next system. That's what's going to follow the jet stream right on down into our neighborhood by Friday, Saturday, and really up our rain chances come especially Sunday. Going to be watching that very closely for us and dialing in whether or not there's a severe risk with that as well. Right now, it doesn't seem like it, but the dynamics will be there, so something we'll continue to investigate. It is only Wednesday after all. Now, in terms of fall chill, this is the pattern. Big old ridge out west and a trough extending down over the eastern seaboard that was originally pulled down by what became a very broad, non tropical version of Aaron. Some folks have actually made the comparison over on social media that Aaron was very reminiscent of Sandy back in 2012, thankfully, minus the landfall. We dodged a big bullet in that department. But in terms of the overall just structure, and the composition of Aaron towards the tail end of its life cycle, its time spent in the Western Atlantic, hugging the coastline of the United States, it was very similar, very broad system, large reach in all directions, and that's what really helped to tug down not only a lot of that mid-latitude, dry, cooler air, but believe it or not, it actually influenced the polar vortex. I know that's weird. We're talking polar vortex in August. It's not going to be sticking around forever, though. We're going to see a bit of a return to form once we get this next system up out of here within the next 5 or 7 days. We're going to keep an eye on that very closely. And then this is also that upper level flow. You can see the jet stream ripping across portions of the Appalachian Mountains, exiting through the mid-Atlantic states. And on the leading edge of that, the nose of that trough digging southward, that's where all your moisture is just going to continue to be pumped in from out west in association with that next system. Now, the highs today, because we had more sunshine, if you notice, we topped out a little higher than we have the last couple days. Again, it's always a give and take with weather. If you follow me long enough, you'll know that's one of my favorite catchphrases, my favorite analogies when talking the way Mother Nature behaves with all of us. It's always a give and take. You're never going to get it all one way or the other. Mother Nature ain't going to take all the chips, and neither are we. It's always got to meet in the middle, kind of find that neutral agreement. But thankfully, we're still not cooking as heftily as we did during portions of July and earlier this month. And you can see tonight's low temperatures were kind of rebounding once again to the mild setup. Gainesville, Ocala, hopefully you dipped into the upper 60s like we talked about yesterday. I haven't checked the observations, I'll openly admit it, but it does look like we're back into the low 70s once again. And the heat index, definitely not as noticeable as well. You can see heat index across Central Florida right now is either non-existent or possibly hugging the low 90s in pair areas like Leesburg and Lakeland, Melbourne. Daytona Beach also sitting right at that 90-degree threshold. Now, for the rainfall totals, before we get ready to segue right out of the first half of the show, you can see that we've made that switch from seeing all the westerly showers coming on the west coast, moving across the state, starting to see a bit more of that east coast sea breeze pop off the showers and storms. Notice the larger accumulations occurred up near New Smyrna Beach. Melissa, if you're in the chat, I did say that you could see some of the rainfall going forward over the next couple days, especially today, and then tomorrow looks like an even greater chance. And then down across the border of Polk and Osceola County, a little bit in Brevard as well. The Cocoa Beach and Melbourne area saw some rainfall as well. I also wanted to pull this up. This was created by meteorologist Michelle Morgan. We have the rainfall totals for the month, and you could see some areas are definitely being favored more than others. And I remember having a bit of a back and forth commenting string over on YouTube not so long ago with someone mentioning they haven't gotten a drop. And I will admit, Florida's been misbehaving a little bit in terms of traditional climatology. It's either all or nothing, and it's been that way even since last spring, last summer. Some of us were under drought conditions almost year-round, others not so much, and I'm very curious to see what the drought monitor has in store for us tomorrow. Now, finally, before we go to break, I'll go ahead and take you hour by hour. If you notice tonight, we're clear now, albeit the model really isn't handling those pop-off thunderstorms we just highlighted in Polk and Marion County. However, tomorrow, as the sun comes up, you see that east coast breeze begin to ignite. And then finally, you can start to see those popcorn showers and storms really kick off with that notable westerly flow, driving the moisture in from the west coast, and the sea breeze kind of undercutting that in the lowest portions of the atmosphere and helping to swoop that moisture up and form those thunderstorms between 3 and 6 o'clock, probably hanging out with us until the early evening hours of your Thursday night. So after the break, you know what time it is. We're going to start talking tropics, so don't go anywhere, folks. We're going to take a quick 3 minutes, get comfortable, grab another drink, get your snack ready. We'll be right back. Welcome back for the second half of the show. We're going to talk all things tropics here in a second, but I also want to show you a little bit of what's ahead for the Labor Day weekend. So you notice this is tonight, Wednesday. Not a huge signature of rainfall out there across Central Florida, and you can kind of see where there is a lack of cloud cover. That's where the dry air brought down by the cold front managed to kind of show itself. But as that washes out, notice we start to see more of the moisture piling up again. And then if you look closely towards the upper left-hand corner of the screen, you can see that big shield of rain sinking on in, headed southeast by very early Friday, upping our rain chances through the day on Friday. You can see the sea breeze kind of igniting a little bit more aggressively than it did today and will tomorrow because of that newfound moisture in the mid and upper portions of our local environment. And then by Saturday and Sunday, we've got a nice little area of low pressure, that counterclockwise spin that sets over top Alabama and the Florida Panhandle, that's just going to wrap in a ton of moisture and bring us more consistent rainfall throughout the weekend, especially more so on Sunday. And I do think those higher rain chances will linger into Monday and Tuesday, depending on how long it takes for this feature to scoot on out of here. Now, as promised, you switch over to your tropical satellite, and I'll admit, it does kind of look like there's a little bit of a wave train still hanging out down there. If you look across the main development region of the Atlantic, and for those of you who may be just joining us tonight, MDR is short for main development region. That's right in through here, the area between the west coast of Africa and the Lesser Antilles island chain of the easternmost Caribbean. Looks like we've got a nice tropical wave right here, and then another one that's making its presence known off the immediate coast of Africa, getting ready to drift towards the west. But notice how much dry air has come in. Really don't have a lot of cloud cover or moisture at all whatsoever over the eastern and central portions of the Atlantic, and that does seem to be the case in what's going to stick around out there for the next 10, maybe even upwards of 14 days, the next 2 weeks. Let's show you the latest on Fernand. I feel bad. It's the forgotten storm out there. Everybody over on social media, on YouTube, TikTok, especially Instagram, you name it, X, whatever social media platform you're a part of, we've almost forgotten that there is an active tropical storm out there. And it's a resilient kind of storm. If you look at this, 5 o'clock as of the advisory, moving at 15 miles an hour off towards the east-northeast, but this puppy is strengthening. It is actually gaining strength as it continues to gain some latitude out there. So I will admit, even though it's kind of a naked swirl on satellite, there really isn't much with it. It's impressive. It's still managing to keep some muscle on the bones. We've got 50-mile-an-hour sustained winds, which is 10 miles an hour more than when we met last night. So I got to give it up to Fernand. It's doing its thing. I think it's trying to recharge and bounce back a little bit since all of us are ignoring it. It's like, hey, you guys can pay attention to me. It's not like, I'm doing any harm or foul to anybody out there. So Fernand is going to continue to rocket off towards the northeast. And now we're going to talk a bit of the dynamics out there. Talk about how it's unfavorable. So what we have here are your high-level winds. And when I say high level, we're talking highest portions of the atmosphere, way above where we are down at the surface, way above the surface of the ocean. This is where we track the jet stream, around 300 and especially 200 millibars, because believe it or not, the height of the atmosphere is higher over the tropics than it is over the poles, and that has to do with the temperature. Like rubbers or plastics on your vehicles, during the cold, they tend to shrink. Then during the heat, they'll expand, just like your tire pressure. So as you can see across the tropics, down in that MDR, see those very strong winds out of the east? Watch how as I fast forward the clock, they start to go away. We go through the weekend into next week, see how those winds are suddenly tapering off. They're far more off towards the south and the southern hemisphere, and across the deep tropics, we really don't have any kind of presence of strong easterly winds. That big old pocket of dark reds and grays, that's called your African easterly jet. It's what drives the tropical waves off of Africa highest up in the atmosphere. Now, if I take us down a couple notches, we go down to the mid-levels. This is around 5,000 feet in the air above us. You'll notice we have very strong easterly winds down at 850 millibars through the tropics and especially through the Caribbean. We call this the Caribbean graveyard. See how those winds from Maracaibo in northern Venezuela, the ABC Islands, and south of Hispaniola in the Caribbean through to Jamaica, that very powerful corridor of easterly winds in the shades of yellows and reds, that's bad for tropical development. And it isn't until past September 10th, about September 11th, that infamous anniversary for a lot of us, 9/11 here in the United States, that's when we start to see things flip. You'll start to see those easterly winds high up in the atmosphere switch to west. And then down at the surface, you're going to start to see these easterly winds also start to retrograde, weaken, and possibly come in out of the west as well. So the stronger winds high up in the upper levels, you want those for tropical development, and you don't want these very strong winds down in the low levels for tropical development. And these are the consistent hostile conditions that are going to prevail likely for a very long time, at least during the first week or two of September. And this is particularly why. You switch over to your surface pressures, your difference between high and low pressure out there, those deeper shades of blues reaching down from the top right corner of the screen, those are higher than normal pressures. So we have a lot of the air in the atmosphere heavier than ordinarily, and it kind of squishes things down. When you have things squished, obviously you can't get that vertical motion, that upward movement to help develop thunderstorms, let alone to create anything rotating out there in the tropics. This is also going to persist for at least the next 10, if not 12 days, give or take. We're going to have to watch the natural ebbing and flowing on that. Nevertheless, even though conditions are not the greatest out there, when you switch over to your tropical probabilities, still have a couple signals I'm going to be keeping my eye on. One off the coast of Africa within the next 7 or 8 days of a tropical wave that might try to do a little something. Even though it's unfavorable out there, we have to remember it is going to be August into September. So naturally, this area of the world, the tropics of the Atlantic, they still want to produce tropical features. So they're going to fight back against all those hostile conditions out there regardless, just given the time of the year. And that's that. There's your little tropical spiel, kind of a key takeaway. Next 10, 14 days could be fairly quiet, not seeing any imminent threats, let alone to us here in the United States. We'll obviously continue to watch for our friends up in Canada and especially down in the Lesser and Greater Antilles of the Caribbean. And when we come back from the second break, I'll answer any and all questions that you may have, so don't go anywhere. I'll be right back with you here momentarily. And with that, we've reached the end of the road. It is Wednesday night. I want to extend a big thanks to everybody out there who tuned in on Boo. Hey, haha, it's definitely the end of the night for me. I want to extend a gracious thank you to everyone who tuned in over on News 6 Plus and over on the News 6 YouTube channel. I'll have to bug Jonathan when he comes back about getting the music hooked up. I'm a big dancer myself, so Melissa Riley out there, whenever you say you want to start dancing, I can definitely relate to you on that one. So before we wrap up, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in on the YouTube chat. If you are still watching over on YouTube, it would mean a lot to us if you go ahead and give that like button a little nudge, bringing that little Davidism over from my YouTube channel. Give that like button a little nudge. Let's make sure the algorithm helps to identify the News 6 YouTube channel, draw in a couple more viewers on a case-by-case basis, especially once the tropics do start to misbehave once again. I know it's quiet out there right now, but we don't want to lull ourselves into a false sense of security. If there's anything that last hurricane season taught us, is it ain't over until it's over. We were nearly tracking a major hurricane into the middle portions of November. And it does seem like the puzzle pieces of the big picture weather pattern are slowly being put back together again to see a very familiar pace through the second half of September. October could be a little sporty, and then who knows what'll happen come November, especially as we trend closer and closer to a La Nina in the tropical Pacific. Something I'll touch on tomorrow. We'll talk a little more about that, especially since I think we've hammered out just about as much as we can looking at the next 7 or so days out across the Atlantic. So, let's see. I saw someone ask a question about possible landfalls out here in the United States. Let's not put all of our eggs into one basket. That's the very fastest way to jinx ourselves. I really do think if we don't see anything come from the deep tropics, like a tropical wave, make its way as far west as the Western Caribbean to then work its way into the Gulf, or perhaps scrape up against the East Coast closer than what Aaron did not too long ago, then maybe we'll have a shot, but I really do think, especially once that Central American gyre pops back up, once we start to track the potential for development near the Yucatan Peninsula, the Western Caribbean, especially the Gulf, where all of our supercharged water temperatures are right now, that's when I do think it's going to be game on. Really do think it's going to be game on. And I want to say September is going to perform. It's just a matter of when the lid comes off. For us here in the rest of the southeast United States, though, it looks like we're going to be in for a wet and rainy pattern for Saturday, Sunday into the first couple days of next week. And I did see a question over on YouTube as well. Jody asks, when will be a good time to go to the animal kingdom? So I personally would argue you might want to give it a little more time. That's another favorite catchphrase for 2025, it seems. Give it a little more time. Let's get through this Labor Day weekend. Let's see how Monday and Tuesday do with our rain chances, because from what I can see, as the pattern starts to readjust, our rain chances should start to diminish some, a little bit more so by Wednesday, Thursday, and late in the week next week. So I would say let's give it, about another week or so. I know today's Wednesday. Let's get through this weekend, and then probably by this time next week, we'll start to see a little bit more of that opportunity to take advantage of at least the first half of the day if you can get out to the parks when they open up around 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. And that's it. There it goes. The clock just hit 9:55. We'll go ahead and start to say good night. I do appreciate y'all. Kiera, thank you so much for the kind comment over on YouTube. She says, thanks for the updates and your expertise. Great job as always. I sincerely appreciate it. And thank you all for rocking with me the last couple days here on News 6 Weather at 9:30. We'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. Hope you have a beautiful rest of your Wednesday night. Until next time, you know the drill. Gonna have it catch on here in the Digital Weather Center too, but this is the Digital Weather Center. Signing out.